Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Liberal MP Craig Kelly. We are going to continue on the conversation of hydroxychloroquine and also move on to vaccines, because this is essentially what Australia and the world is waiting on. And this is where I think a lot of the division comes in. People are saying some people have used the word cure. The frontline doctors, Dr. Emmanuel, was saying we've got a cure. Others are saying, look, it's not necessarily a cure, but we certainly have something that could reduce hospitalizations, ICU admissions and death. And everybody else is sort of on the other side of that is saying, we need the vaccine to open up. So everybody's talking about the fact that for hydroxychloroquine, Dr. Fauci has come out and said we need randomized, double-blind, peer-reviewed studies which are published in major scientific journals. The vaccine that Australia is banking on, is that going to undergo the same sort of scrutiny?
That's a very good question. Look, firstly, I said, when it comes down to these randomized trials, remember what you are doing to do a proper randomized trial on hydroxychloroquine and zinc. You've got to get a group of sick COVID patients that are at risk of death and say, look, we may not give you hydroxychloroquine and zinc. You may just get a placebo. Now, when there are so many observational studies that show that those that have taken hydroxychloroquine have had 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 and even 80% less chance of death. To run such a trial is just morally wrong. So other experts I've spoken to said you do not run randomized trials on approved drugs. So this thing they're hanging out, you have to show a randomized trial, I think is absolutely an appalling argument. Now, when it comes to the injection, firstly, I have my real doubts about whether people are just going to line up like sheep to be vaccinated. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've never commented against, never had any issues about vaccinations before, but I think I need to read a little bit more on the subject. But we had a thing here in Australia. They asked everyone to download an app to their phone. It was called a COVID app, and the idea was that you had this on your mobile phone, and if you came in contact with another mobile phone that had the app on, so it'd be like a way to trace if you tested positive for COVID, people that came within close to you could be notified, and likewise, if you came in contact with someone that had COVID, the app would pick it up and let you know. Now, this app had less than 30%, and there was a very big push, very big government advertising campaign, and only sort of like less than 30% of the people would press a button on their phone to download an app. So what chance are you going to get more than 30% that are going to download it back into their body? They're going to actually sort of get in their car and go down to the doctor's surgery and line up and roll their sleeve up and say, okay, stick a needle into me and, let's hope what's in that, let's hope what's in that potion actually might work and might make effective and won't hurt me. I just can't see that happening.
Well, there are a lot of the comments on any post about the vaccine is really interesting, and I have spent hours going through them and reading them. And there are a lot of people that are saying I'm pro-vax, but I'm not doing it because there is a question around efficacy. Will they be able to develop one that is effective enough to do what we need it to do to bring us out of lockdown and all the things that the government is saying? But they're worried about long-term effects, and that they obviously can't do long-term trials because they're trying to rush it through. So you've got pro-vaxxers saying, I don't want to take this vaccine. You've got anti-vaxxers doing what anti-vaxxers do. And then you've got the Australian government sort of flip-flopping saying, this will be mandatory. If you want to be able to work, travel, basically be out in the world, it will be mandatory. When there was an uproar over that, they backtracked and said, well, no, it's not going to be mandatory, but you won't be able to travel, you won't be able to do all of these things. Can they do that?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I just think this is going to be a huge issue of public debate in the new year, or whenever the vaccine becomes, if it even becomes available. And this is, to me, why the debate over what other therapeutic alternatives there are is so important. Now, my understanding of all the rules and regulations, if you say that hydroxychloroquine and zinc, or whether it be ivermectin and zinc, is an effective therapeutic cure, my understanding is that the process of the vaccine needs to do about 4 years plus of long trials to make sure it's actually safe. But if there's no therapeutic cure available or recognised, so if you can knock out hydroxychloroquine, you knock out ivermectin, therefore that enables the drug companies to push the vaccine through basically on the short track. Now, anyone that's made anything or built anything or done produced anything knows that when you rush stuff through on the short track, often there's sort of some types of, you try to cut corners, often mistakes get made. So, I've just got, firstly, can this drug be developed that's shown it has some safety with even doing the shortcut? Mm-hmm. Will the public actually take it without sort of rioting in the streets? And then the thing is, will it be effective? I understand. My understanding is even some things like the flu vaccine that people get is only sometimes like 50, 60% effective.
It's all just so mind-boggling to think that we are in a position in 2020 where this is all happening. Because every new year we always toast and say, here's to a better year. I don't think anybody has ever thought we would have a year like this on Earth. One of the questions I have in regard to the vaccine is, it is no secret, no matter which side of this you sit on, there are hundreds of billions of dollars to be made. Politicians are renowned for having investments and shares and all of that in big pharma. Is this something that should be looked at when they're making decisions like they're making at the moment on a vaccine for COVID that will potentially vaccinate the entire world, because that stands to make them a ton of money?
I'm not particularly concerned about politicians. We have, I'm not sure, we have disclosure regulations. So we have to, if we have shares in a particular company, we have to disclose that. We have a form that we fill out every time we make a change. So if I had shares in any sort of mining company or pharmaceutical company, that goes on my register. That register is publicly there for everyone to look at and to question me when I make that decision. I would be more concerned about some of the health bureaucrats. That's it, because remember, they're the ones that are pushing and giving the advice to the politicians. So I think a lot of these health bureaucrats should be very transparent about what shares they got, what investments that they got. So at least there's some transparency about when they are making, when they're giving advice.
Now, one of the things that I saw on your page when I was going through your Facebook page in prepping for this was there were actually quite a few people saying, Craig, what can we do to help make a change or do something? Is there anything that they can do?
Well, because remember, a lot of that was in relation to the situation that's happening in the state of Victoria here at the moment. Effectively, the Premier, which is probably the equivalent of the state governor in the US, has gone mad. Completely, utterly mad. You have the state in lockdown. People cannot travel. This has been going on for months and months now. People can only go out of their homes for 2 hours a day. They can't travel more than 5 kilometres from their house. They can't go out without a mask. And we are seeing the most brutal arrests of people in the streets. That if you saw this happening to people in China, there would be international outrage, and there would be internet calls to the, wanting to take China to the International Human Rights Court because of the brutality of their police. Now, to see this in my country, where our police generally have a very, very high reputation, we don't see where we see the defund the police movement in the US. There's no such equivalent thing here in Australia. The police have an excellent reputation. And to see the utter brutality And when you see when they went into a lady's house and they arrested a pregnant woman in her 20s with 2 young kids in her own kitchen, right? And handcuffed her as though she's some type of violent criminal that needs to be restrained, handcuffed her with her children hiding under the bed. And they said, and she said, "What have I done wrong? What have I done wrong?" And the policeman said, "It's about a Facebook post." And I saw, I started to laugh. I started to laugh. This is like some type of comedy thing. And then I realised, my goodness, this is true. This is actually happening. This is happening in my country. They're handcuffing pregnant women about a Facebook post. Now, normally, and this was lady, she said, "I've got to go. I'm due to see a gynecologist or an ultrasound, something this morning." She couldn't go. They took her to the police station. Now, I sort of thought that when you, it's part of our DNA, natural DNA. So when you see a pregnant woman, you do everything that you possibly can to make sure she's comfortable, to make sure she's okay, to make sure she's not stressed. You make sure you stand up in the bus and or the train, and you give them their seat, and you help them across the road, and you let them go in front of you in the queue at the shopping centre. You do everything that you possibly can. But to have police officers handcuffing her in their own house and not showing some discretion is just, to me, beyond comprehension of what's happening.
Well, the question for me watching that is more along the lines of, at what point did anybody lose their ability in Australia to speak out against the government?
Now, that lady I was talking about before, her lawyers actually, I got involved in help with this. Her lawyers, one of the defences that they are running against her is that any such law that prevents her from posting something on Facebook about a protest against the government, if she's denied that right, that law is unconstitutional and therefore is invalid. So that's a test that's coming up before our High Court very soon.
So it sounds like this particular lawsuit is basically going to set the standard for all cases moving forward in terms of Victorians or Australians' freedom of speech.
Yes, it should. There's already been cases that, to me, I think this is almost like a black and white. There are no legal cases black and white, but I think this is, if you look at the previous cases and previous rulings our High Court has made, to me this seems almost like a black and white case. And I would expect the Victorian police would realise this and wouldn't want it set as a precedent, and therefore are likely to draw the charges beforehand.
There are supporters of the fact that she was arrested, because they're saying, well, she was inciting people to go against lockdowns that are in place to keep people safe. What do you say to that?
Well, that's actually a selfish attitude that you want to take away someone's freedom and rights to protest because you want to feel safe. Now, there's no evidence whatsoever that any of these protests have led to one more infection, let alone whether the infection was asymptomatic and the person was never even sick, let alone one hospitalisation or one death. There's no evidence whatsoever that it does. But there's enormous evidence that these lockdowns are causing a lot of very significant harm in our society. We've seen some numbers released lately that show a very large increase in suicides, especially youth suicides. Now, that's a lagging factor, and I fear that when that data is released in the months to come, it will show a tragedy happening. We've seen doctors reporting that there's been a major fall in people going for their cancer screenings and their normal health screenings that they did. So you're going to have a delay there, people delaying medication. We've seen studies that show an increase in stillbirths during this period of time, substantial increase in drug taking and drug abuse during this time. So you've got and the other one which shocked me, our Australian Federal Police said during a parliamentary inquiry, they said that they basically described the lockdowns as providing a rich environment for pedophiles. That was the words that our Australian Federal Police said the lockdowns are a rich environment for pedophiles to operate, And they said the activity of child sexual offences have increased 150% during this period.
150%.
150%, not double, 150%. So that's what you've got. All these negatives in society against the benefits, so-called illusory benefits, of the lockdown. Not to mention the damage to the police's reputation. Now that will be a generational. Now you want to live we're lucky we live in a society where if you see the police walking down the street, it's good day, officer, how you going? And it becomes a circular relationship that you trust the police trust you. Everyone, you have a much safer community. If you have a society where someone sees a police officer and becomes automatically scared, and the police then sort of treat everyone as a suspect or a criminal, you have a lot poorer society if you're like that. And that's also going to be the great cost of what's happening in Victoria. Not let alone the economic costs. We've heard, you may have this phrase, they've been saying, we're all in this together. Everyone's on the same. But well, the reality is we're not all in this together. If you're a government worker, you basically have your income guaranteed. And in fact, you're probably slightly better off because you may not have had to travel to work, but your income has been guaranteed. So you've had less expenses, right? But your income hasn't changed. But for a lot of people in the private sector, especially in tourism and travel and hospitality, their businesses have been absolutely gutted and their incomes have been destroyed. And businesses that they spent their entire life building up have been ruined by these lockdowns. So the disparity in who's paying the costs of these lockdowns is absolutely extraordinary.
We are going to leave part 2 of our interview right there, but we are going to be back tomorrow with part 3.